Wife slept with boss, opened marriage, then regretted it when I moved on. I never thought I would find myself here, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet. But I guess life has a way of throwing curveballs you never see coming. My wife and I had been together for 10 years, married for 8. We met in college and she was my first and only. I always believed that made our bond special, like something out of an old-fashioned love story. Turns out, I was the only one who saw it that way. A couple of years back, she landed a new job. At first, she struggled to fit in. She had always been the quiet type, but I encouraged her to put herself out there, to make some friends. Eventually, she did. The women she got close to were a mixed bunch. Some were single, some divorced, a few dating, but none were married. At first, I was happy for her. She started going out for drinks, attending parties, and joining in on whatever plans her friends had. It was all harmless at first, but then things started shifting. She became more distant, always out, always busy. Our conversations grew shorter, and intimacy, well, that started fading too. Then her company brought in a new manager. He was younger than I expected, confident, the kind of guy people naturally gravitate toward. At first, she only mentioned him casually, how he handled work situations, how he had fresh ideas. But over time, it became more than that. She would bring him up constantly, almost admiringly. And suddenly, her behavior made sense. I asked her about it, asked why she seemed so fascinated by this guy, but she laughed it off. Not long after, she started throwing out strange questions like whether I regretted not being with more women before we got married. I told her no, that she was all I ever needed. For a split second, I saw something flash across her face, Gret, maybe, but she quickly changed the subject. Then came the bombshell. She suggested opening our marriage, said it might spice things up. I nearly laughed in disbelief. My wife had never been the type to suggest something like that. She was never the free-spirited, anything-goes type. I asked her straight out if this had anything to do with her new manager. She denied it, but she admitted she felt like she had missed out on something. She swore she loved me, did not want to lose me, and thought this might be a way to keep our marriage strong. I warned her she was playing with fire, but in the end, I agreed. We set ground rules: no bringing other people into our home, no talking about it more than necessary. That was supposed to keep things clean. Well, it did not. Over the next year, my wife went on dates, had flings, and surprises started a full-blown relationship with that manager. Meanwhile, I went on a few dates, but nothing felt right. I could not bring myself to sleep with anyone else. Every now and then, she would ask me if I was doing okay, but her concern was surface level at best. She was too caught up in her new life to see what was happening to me. The love I had for her, the trust, the connection was slipping away, and she did not seem to notice. Then, everything changed. I met someone, a woman who made me feel alive again. She was sharp, funny, with a smile that could light up the darkest of days. It started with small, things-easy conversation, effortless laughter, but before long, it became more. When we were together, it was different. It was passionate, natural, something I had never experienced before. The way she touched me, the way she looked at me was like she actually saw me, like I was someone worth wanting. At first, my wife found it amusing. Then, as weeks turned into months, her amusement turned into discomfort. She started asking questions, suddenly interested in who I was seeing. I reminded her this was her idea. She was the one who had a full-fledged relationship with another man. She had no right to be jealous now. Then, out of nowhere, she changed. She started coming home early, making dinner, keeping the house spotless. She would drop off lunch at my workplace, send sweet messages, and, for the first time in years, she initiated intimacy. Maybe before, that would have meant everything to me. Maybe I would have been ecstatic. But now, I barely felt anything. I went through the motions, but it was empty. Something inside me had shut down, and I knew she could feel it too. One night, I finally asked her why. Why the sudden shift? What was she trying to do? She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said she wanted to prove that she loved me, that she was happy with me. I could not help it. I laughed. I asked her about her little group of friends, about her beloved manager, about all the nights she spent out living her free life. She had nothing to say, just turned away and cried herself to sleep. The next day, she sat me down, waiting for me like she had rehearsed what she was going to say. She wanted to close the marriage. Said it was all a mistake, that she regretted everything, that she wanted to focus on us again. I asked her to be honest. to tell me where all of this had started. And just like that, the truth spilled out. Her friends had planted the idea in her head, made her think she had missed out on something. And her manager? He had only encouraged it further. He was the one who pushed her to explore, to be free. She swore it only got physical once. But at that point, did it even matter? She compared it to being drunk behind the wheel of a speeding Carrick's exhilarating at first. But now, she was paying the price. She said she never needed a comparison, that what we had was truly special. But now, she feared she had shattered it beyond repair. I told her the truth. I did not know if I could ever see her as my wife again. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I just held her, saying nothing, until she cried herself to sleep in my arms. Since then, she has left her job, cut off all those so-called friends, and walked away from her manager. She told me she would spend the rest of her life proving herself to me, that she would work herself to the bone just to be seen as my wife again. But here's the thing: I never cut ties with the woman I fell for, and I do not know if I ever will. She makes me feel like a man, like I can take on the world, something my wife stopped making me feel a long time ago. I am lost. I want to believe that something can be salvaged, that maybe, just maybe, I can feel for my wife what I once did. But at the same time, I know my lover saved me when I was at my lowest. What do I do? We have our first marriage counseling session in a couple of hours. No clue how that is going to go. Edit. I did not expect this kind of response. Honestly, I just needed to vent, but the amount of advice and support has been overwhelming. Thank you. I will post an update after our session because, quite frankly, that alone deserves its own post. But before that, let me answer some common questions. My lover is not married. She is in an open marriage, though. As for what I want from my marriage, I still do not know. I love my wife, but trust, that is a different story. And yet, after everything, I find myself unable to just walk away. That is the whole reason I agreed to counseling, to clear my head, to stop flip-flopping between leaving and staying, to finally make a decision with some clarity. Some people ask why I never demanded to see my wife's phone. The truth? I did not want to. I knew what I would find, and honestly, imagining it was bad enough. Seeing real proof messages, pictures would have wrecked me beyond repair. Speaking of phones, something happened this morning. After my shower, I walked out and found my wife standing there, holding my phone, hands shaking. She was reading a message from my lover. I did not say anything, just took the phone from her and walked away. The message read, "Good morning, handsome. I slept in your t-shirt last night because I miss going to bed and waking up in your arms. I miss greeting the new day with a kiss from you." I think that one hit her harder than anything else so far. For the last 2 hours, she has been glued to my side, followed me everywhere. Even when I went for my morning jog, something she has never once done in our entire relationship, she tagged along. Some of you asked how I met my lover. It was not planned. One night, my wife was out on one of her dates, and I had taken to spending my evenings at a bookstore, one of the few places that still gave me some sense of peace. That is where I saw her. She was walking down the street when a short, stocky guy started following her, shouting something. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was not my business. But then I saw him grab her arm, yanking her around hard. Before I even realized it, my body just moved. I have been practicing judo for years, not professionally, but enough to handle myself. I restrained the guy, and in the process, let us just say he left with a dislocated wrist. Turns out, she had reported him for sexual harassment at work, and he had been fired. He did not take it well. Afterward, she insisted on buying me coffee as a thank you. I agreed, and that was the start of something I never saw coming. At first, she was hesitant when she learned I was married, said she did not want to be the reason a family fell apart. But once I told her the full story, how my wife had pushed for an open marriage, how she was the one who had already moved on long before I did, she stopped hesitating. I once joked with her, "You have two options for the story you tell your grandkids either. Your grandfather saved your grandmother from a creep and she fell into his arms. Or your grandmother took a year off to screw around and I, like an idiot, went along with it." She laughed, but we both knew the truth. This was not some fairy tale romance. This was just two broken people who somehow found comfort in each other. Update 1. The therapist seemed professional, experienced, and most importantly, neutral. She actually seemed eager to help, which was more than I expected. Since it was our first session, I thought we would just be easing into things. But my wife, she went all in. She admitted that her group of friends had filled her head with doubts, that they made her believe she had missed out on life because she had never been with anyone else. They told her she had settled too young, that she had never had the kind of wild, exciting experiences they had. And of course, all of Thievery Single One were either single or divorced. Not one of them had a lasting relationship. The therapist pointed out that this kind of thinking can be poison to a marriage. My wife nodded. Then she dropped another truth bomb. After her new manager started giving her attention, those same friends encouraged her to see where it would go. They told her this was her chance to explore and find herself. She admitted she felt guilty. She swears nothing physical happened, at least not at first, but the emotional connection, that was already there. And when one of her divorced friends suggested an open marriage as a loophole, it felt like the perfect excuse. So after convincing herself and me that this would somehow make our marriage stronger, she dove headfirst into this adventure. At first, she says, it was intoxicating. It felt exciting. But deep down, it was empty. It was nothing like what we had built together over the years. And slowly, that realization started creeping in. She admitted she could see the hurt in my eyes, but she kept telling herself it would pass, that this was just a phase. She never stopped to consider what she was actually doing to me. And for that, she says she will never forgive herself. She thought I would eventually accept this new reality. But then something changed. My lover became a real part of my life. She said it was little things at first. I started smiling more, looking at my phone with excitement instead of dread. I would step out of the room to take calls. I looked lighter, happier, and for the first time since this whole mess began, she felt Ida Sharp, gut-wrenching panic. She ran back to her friends for advice, but they brushed it off, said this was normal in an open marriage. Then, the same divorced friend who had started this whole mess looked at her and said, "Looks like his lover makes him happy." That was when it finally hit her. The thought that another woman not her was giving me joy, that nearly made her pass out. She begged her friends for advice on how to fix things, how to win me back. And you know what they told her? If you could not handle it, why did you open your marriage in the first place? That was the moment she realized something. These people were never her friends. They were never looking out for her, never had her best interests at heart. They had wrecked their own lives, and instead of trying to fix themselves, they had dragged her down with them. And in the process, she had destroyed the one thing that actually meant something to her marriage. Since then, my wife has been on a full-blown mission to win me back. I, on the other hand, kept my mouth shut during most of the counseling session. But I did make one thing clear: I still have my lover in my life. The counselor did not seem too surprised. She just said no real resolution could be reached as long as I was still involved with someone else, and suggested we book another session for the next day. She also pointed out that it is rare for someone to stay with their first love for so long. She made it sound like any storm could be weathered if both people were willing to work for it. I have a strong feeling she wants to turn us into one of her success stories. Sorry for the long update, but I figured I might as well lay everything out. Edit. Like I said before, my lover makes me feel like a man. What I mean is when I walk through the door after a long, exhausting day, I am not met with cold silence or passive-aggressive comments. Instead, I get a warm hug, a smile, a simple, rough day. And just like that, the weight on my shoulders feels lighter. When I doubt myself, she reminds me that I am capable of anything, that I can push through, that I am worth something. And I know some people are going to call this sexist, so I will apologize in advance, but she makes space for me to be the man in the relationship. She believes that men and women are built differently, not in a way that makes one better than the other, just in a way that means they complement each other. She says men are warriors fighters, protectors, but they are not naturally as nurturing as women. She once told me, "A gentle heart can calm a raging volcano." Something from her culture, I think. She believes that in the bedroom, a woman should keep things exciting, should rule that space. But outside of it, she does not try to control or undermine me. She respects my decisions, supports my choices, does not try to fix me, just stands beside me. She also has a very simple philosophy. Men do not need much. Meet those few needs, and a man would slay a dragon for the woman he loves. Now, I am not saying she is some kind of pushover. She believes in equal pay, mutual respect, all of that. But she does not push for the extremes that some people do these days. Like I said, this might come off as old-fashioned, but I think it is just a difference in culture. Edit 2. Like I said before, my lover makes me feel like a man. I assume most of you reading this are from the West. And let's be real, there are not a lot of women in the West who will do this for a man. Maybe 1% at most. They are rare, they are in high demand, and somehow I managed to find one. Now, let's talk about my wife for a sec. She had everything: a husband who adored her, a stable marriage, a life that most people would kill for. But she threw it all away because someone whispered in her ear, "You have not lived. You need to experience more." And what did she do? She put me the one man who had loved her unconditionally on the back burner so she could go out and be free. She let some random people convince her that sleeping around with a guy who did not give a damn about her was some kind of empowerment. Sound familiar? Because now I am the one in the same position. I have a woman who wants only me, who sees me, respects me, makes me feel like I can take on the world. And what am I doing? Sitting here, still tangled up in the mess my wife created, wondering if maybe I should give her another chance. Am I really about to make the same mistake my wife made? Am I about to throw away someone who loves me for someone who only now wants me because she's afraid to lose me? Because let's be honest, the only reason my wife is suddenly all in on our marriage again is because another woman saw my worth first. If I leave my lover behind, I already know what will happen. It will go back to the way it was. And when that happens, I will have lost them both. Because a woman who makes a man feel like a man, she is not going to wait around forever. And once she is gone, I will be sitting here wishing I had made the right choice when I had the chance. Update 2. Thank you to everyone who has reached out. I have not been able to reply to every message, but I appreciate all of you. This whole thing has felt like a full-blown episode of Jerry Springer. Here is where things stand now. I moved out. My brother owns a few properties, and he offered me one of his apartments at a ridiculously cheap price. He would have let me stay for free, but I refused. I needed to do this on my own. Now, here is where things take a turn. During our second counseling session, I started asking the hard questions. Questions I had been avoiding. Questions that a lot of you had suggested. I asked my wife if she was absolutely sure that nothing physical happened with her manager before we opened the marriage. She looked down at the floor, hands shaking. "Please do not make me say it," she whispered. "If I say it out loud, it will destroy us." I pushed. She broke. Turns out it was not full-on physical, but it was close enough. They touched themselves in front of each other. Yeah, you read that right. Apparently, this genius of a man convinced her that because they never actually touched, it did not count as cheating, that they were just appreciating each other's beauty. And my wife? She believed him. I sat there in complete silence, trying to process what I had just heard. I do not even know if I was shocked at that point. It was like my brain had already prepared for the worst. She was sobbing, telling me how stupid she had been, how she should have seen through his manipulation. But honestly, I did not even feel angry. I just felt done. She started shaking, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the snot running from her nose as she sobbed and apologized over and over again. Even the counselor looked stunned, like she could not believe what she was hearing. Then, right in the middle of the session, my wife collapsed to her knees, wrapping her arms around my legs, holding on like I was the only thing keeping her from drowning. "Please, please, I am so sorry. I was so stupid. I should have seen it. Please forgive me." I did not say anything for a long time. Then I asked her, "What changed? What finally made you see him for what he was?" She sniffled, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and finally spoke. After she started distancing herself from her friends, her manager's attitude toward her shifted. At first, it was subtlest attention, fewer compliments, an air of indifference that had not been there before. But then, one evening, as she was leaving a meeting, she happened to pass by his office. The door was slightly open, and she heard his voice. He was talking to another guy, another manager, laughing, joking. And then he said something that made her stop cold. I was surprised at how easy it was to get her. "She is proof you cannot trust the quiet ones." His colleague chuckled. "Did you actually like her?" And his response? "She was a pleasant distraction, but I have zero intention of breaking up with my fiancé." Then he laughed again like it was the funniest thing in the world. "This was just to get it out of my system. The only woman who truly understands me is my fiancé, and I would never leave her." And as if that was not enough, he added one final dagger. "I kind of feel bad for her husband, but hey, you snooze, you lose." That was the moment my wife realized exactly what she had been to him. Nothing. A cheap thrill. A side piece. Just another notch in his belt. She had shattered our marriage for this? For a guy who had never even considered her as anything more than a passing amusement? She ran out of the building, straight to the parking lot. And then she threw up She said the weight of everything she had done came crashing down all at once. Her first thoughts, what have I done? And then, please forgive me, I am so sorry. I looked at her carefully, studying her face. Then I asked, did you love him? And when did you stop loving me? Through her tears, she met my eyes and whispered, I never stopped loving you. And you know what? That only made it worse. She told me he was just different. She mistook it for love, convinced herself that she needed something new to feel alive again. But now, she sees it for what it really was, nothing but an illusion. A stupid, fleeting fantasy. Then she grabbed my arm, gripping it so tight her nails dug into my skin. Her voice was desperate, urgent. I know I messed up, but I miss us. I miss what we had. I want to fix this. Let's move away. Start fresh, just the two of us, as it was meant to be. I exhaled slowly. That would not be fair to my lover. The moment those words left my mouth, it was like something inside her snapped. She broke down completely, sobbing, shaking, saying things I could barely understand. She clung to me, held onto my shirt like she was afraid I would vanish into thin air. It took both me and the counselor nearly half an hour to get her to calm down. Eventually, the counselor convinced her that time apart might actually help. That maybe, if she really wanted to fix things, she needed to give me space first. I wish that had been the end of it, I really do. But when we got home, something else happened. As I was packing up some of my things, my wife's laptop lit up with an incoming video call. She hesitated when she saw the name. Then, slowly, she answered. It was one of her old friends. And she was crying. Through sobs, she told my wife what had happened. Turns out, after my wife quit her job, this friend started up a little fling with the manager. And guess what? She had a pregnancy scare. The moment she told him, it was like flipping a switch. 1 second, he was charming, smooth. In control the next, he was cold, distant, almost unrecognizable. Like Dr. Jekyll and Miss Hyde. To make matters worse, she already had a boyfriend, a man she claimed she could see a future with. And the reason she even had a fling with the manager in the first place? Curiosity. Sound familiar? Seems to be a trend. Her boyfriend found out after stumbling across an email between her and the manager discussing the pregnancy. But here is the kicker: the manager accused her of baby trapping him. At this point, I do not even have the words. This whole thing has been a disaster from start to finish. All I know is, I am not rushing into anything. I need time to think, time to heal, and most importantly, time to figure out if I even want to save this marriage at all. Of course, her boyfriend left her, and the reason she reached out to my wife, she thought my wife had somehow saved our marriage and was looking for advice. I just turned and walked out,